Good afternoon. I want to welcome you to the 2023 Winter Program Series, Living Well Wednesday. My name is Sherilyn Jackson, Extension Family and Consumer Sciences Specialist in the Northeast region, and I will be your host for today. Our Living Well Wednesday is a virtual learning series hosted by K-State Research and Extension Family and Consumer Sciences professionals from across the state. Our topics will touch on a wide variety of essential skills to empower you and your family to live, work, and thrive. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping rules. First, be respectful and open of others throughout the presentation. And feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box and comments into the chat box. The Q&A box does have a feature where you can ask anonymously if you're more comfortable with that. Our monitor, Erin Tynan, will make sure to go over the questions at the end of the presentation. Today's session will be recorded and posted to our Living Well Wednesday webpage along with additional resources. You will be able to find all future and past programs on our website as well. And lastly, a friendly reminder, our Living Well Wednesday series discusses a new topic every second and fourth Wednesday in January, February, and March over the lunch hour. Be sure to check our website for additional details on registration, topics, and links to recorded webinars. We do want to acknowledge that KSRE is an equal opportunity employer. Therefore, we do not discriminate against anyone. So if there is a special request or a concern that you need to allow for you to attend our programs, please reach out to us. And I want to thank our presenters for joining us today, Stephanie Gutierrez, Extension Program Coordinator, and Sarah Sawyer, the Nutrition, Health, and Wellness Agent in Sedgwick County. Stephanie and Sarah are also co-coordinators of the K-State Research and Extension Hypertension Awareness and Prevention Pilot Program. So I will welcome to Sarah and Stephanie, and I will turn the rest of the time over to you.
Thank you, Sherilyn. We're excited to be here, and we can't wait to share what we've learned about hypertension awareness, prevention, and management strategies. So I'll just give Sarah a second to get our PowerPoint set up. Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. So again, my name is Stephanie, and I'll just be presenting for the first half, and then we'll hear Sarah speak a little later in the segment. So today's presentation is called Fighting Back Against the Silent Killer, Hypertension Awareness, Prevention, and Management Strategies. So we're just going to jump right in, and we're going to talk a little bit about what is blood pressure. We hear these words floating around, hypertension, high blood pressure, but what actually is blood pressure? So blood pressure is when your heart beats. It pumps blood into your blood vessels, which are your arteries and your veins. This creates pressure against the blood vessel walls, and this blood pressure causes oxygenated blood to flow to all of the parts of your body. So blood pressure is an extremely important part of homeostasis. It keeps the body functioning normally. So we measure blood pressure in two numbers. The first is the top number, and it's called your systolic pressure. And this number indicates how much pressure your blood is exerting against your artery walls when the heart beats. In this example, in the picture, you can see that this gentleman's systolic or top number is 110 millimeters of mercury. The bottom number is the diastolic pressure, and this indicates how much pressure your blood is exerting against your artery walls while the heart is resting between beats. And so in this example, you can see on the picture that the bottom number is 67 millimeters of mercury. So when we write the blood pressure, we would say, or when we say it, we say 110 over 67, and that simply means the systolic over the diastolic pressure. So now that we know how to measure blood pressure, it's important to establish what a normal reading is. And so the American Heart Association has published this rainbow guide to inform our readings. So normal would be in the green range, and that's a systolic or upper number less than 120, and a diastolic or lower number less than 80. And you can see as you go down the chart, as it becomes more elevated or more red, that would indicate a more dangerous blood pressure for that person. So when does high blood pressure become hypertension? It's important to note that your blood pressure will change throughout the day based on your activities. So if you just exercised, or if you used tobacco, if you just smoked, if you walk into a doctor's office and that makes you feel stressed out, those are all things that are going to increase your blood pressure. Blood pressure or high blood pressure becomes hypertension when the readings consistently are above normal. So that means that it doesn't come back down after the stressful situation. You're consistently staying sort of in a danger zone. And only a healthcare team or provider can diagnose high blood pressure and determine treatment decisions. So it's important to meet with your provider about those things. And every person is different, so guidelines used to diagnose hypertension may differ from healthcare professional to healthcare professional. So that your healthcare team would evaluate things specific to your health, your condition, and your blood pressure readings. So everyone's different and may be diagnosed with hypertension at a different point in their healthcare journey. So when we think about the symptoms of high blood pressure, those can be tricky. Usually high blood pressure develops over time and has no warning signs or symptoms. And that's why we refer to it as the silent killer. Many people do not know that they have hypertension. Measuring your blood pressure is the only way to know whether or not you have high blood pressure. But in severe cases of high blood pressure or hypertensive crisis, people may experience flushing, blood spots in the eyes, nosebleeds, or headaches. So there's different risk factors for developing high blood pressure. There are non-modifiable risks, which are risks that we can't change. And those are family history, increased age, male gender, race, and chronic kidney disease. So understanding these risk factors can help you become more aware of how likely you are to develop hypertension or high blood pressure. There are also risk factors for developing hypertension that you can modify, so you can control these things. And those would be your activity level, your diet, so avoiding excess levels of sodium or cholesterol, being overweight or obese, drinking too much alcohol, having high cholesterol, diabetes, smoking or tobacco use, and of course, excess levels of stress. So you can change these risk factors to help you prevent and manage your high blood pressure. So some consequences of having hypertension are stroke, vision loss, heart failure, heart attack, sexual dysfunction, and then kidney disease or even kidney failure. And these can occur because when your blood pressure is too high for too long, it damages the blood vessels that feed your organs and your circulatory system. So when left untreated, high blood pressure can contribute to the conditions that you see on the left side in the graphic there. And so having high blood pressure can really decrease the efficiency of your circulatory system. So when we look at the prevalence of high blood pressure in Kansas communities, we know that in 2021, 34.3% of adult Kansans reported being told by a healthcare professional that they had high blood pressure. And this is compared to only about 32.4% of adults nationwide. So Kansas is higher than the nationwide average. And in Kansas, high blood pressure is most prevalent in populations that have less than a high school education, Black men, individuals over the age of 65, and individuals who have incomes below $25,000 per year. And when we look at the prevalence of high blood pressure in communities nationwide, we know that over 1 in 2 African Americans have the disease, over 1 in 3 Asians or Pacific Islanders, over 1 in 3 Hispanics or Latinos, and over 1 in 4 American Indians or Alaskan Natives all have high blood pressure. And sadly, nearly half of all of these communities do not have it under control. And so I'm going to hand over the next part of the presentation to Sarah Sawyer, and she's going to talk about ways to manage high blood pressure.
Thank you, Stephanie. So I think a lot of the information that was presented, the statistics, can be a little overwhelming and a little unnerving when, if you're thinking about your community or yourself or your loved ones having high blood pressure. But there are definitely things that we can do on an everyday basis to prevent high blood pressure or to manage our high blood pressure. So there's going to be a lot of information given to you in these next few minutes. But I want you to think about what is something that you can walk away from today to work on this. It's those small things we do every day that add up and make a big difference. I want you to think about if something resonates with you, whether it be, when we're talking about more nutrient-dense foods and reducing our sodium intake. If I give the example of taking your salt shaker off the table, think about it in those small ways. That's sometimes I think, can focus on these are the things I have to do, and these are the things that these are the things that I'm told to do. This is what I have to do. This is what I have to eat. But when we think of it in a way as not changing everything at once, but really making those small changes, it can be a little less overwhelming and a little more doable. So other things like limiting our alcohol, being consistent with physical activity, managing our stress, a healthy body weight. If we're smoking, using tobacco, working on stopping that, taking our medications, having more of an understanding and awareness of what's going on and asking our doctors questions, being an advocate for ourselves, and then self-monitoring your blood pressure. What does that look like? What does that mean? And we'll talk about that. But today we are going to focus on 4 of those items because we don't have the time today. But the first one, we're going to talk about eating more nutrient-dense foods. So I went on a tangent just a minute ago on making those small changes with your health. Oftentimes we think of food as good or bad, right? And so I want you to take a step back and let's think of it as foods that are more nutrient dense versus foods that are more calorically dense. So we know those foods that are more calorically dense, like cake, cookies, pie, that type of thing. The nutrient dense foods are the foods that are going to be, our fruits and vegetables. They're higher in fiber, our whole grains. So our brown rice versus white rice, 100% whole grain bread versus white bread, that type of thing. Our lean meats and proteins, nuts, seeds, legumes, low-fat dairy, also our heart-healthy fats. So I've already mentioned them in regards to the protein. So fish, salmon, mackerel, tuna, that type of thing. Also our nuts and our seeds. So almonds, walnuts, unsalted. I really should go back in and put unsalted there. And then some of our seeds, sunflower seeds, that type of thing. Those are going to give us those monounsaturated, polyunsaturated fats. So these are the nutrient dense foods that, we need to incorporate more of. So let's think about what do I need? What can I add into my everyday eating plan instead of what do I need to take away? Because when we think of it in that regard, it seems a lot more doable. But also focusing as we're increasing our fiber consumption, from our whole grains, from our fruits and vegetables, focus on increasing that water intake as well. But of course, if your doctor has you on a sodium restriction, obviously being cognizant of that. So we talked about the nutrient dense foods. What about reducing our sodium intake? So sodium is a mineral. It's found in many of our foods. Our body needs, a certain amount of sodium to function for our muscles, our nerves. It also helps keep our fluid in balance throughout our body. However, you can get too much. And when that happens, that can cause your body to retain excess water. And what that does, it's harder for your organs to function. Your heart has to work harder, your lungs has to work harder to breathe, and then your heart to pump blood throughout your body. So it's wearing. And it's really important that we are monitoring the amount of sodium that we're taking in the foods that we eat. So more than 70% of the sodium in our daily intake is from processed convenience foods, going out to eat. 11% is adding it in, table salt when we're cooking, and then 14% of that occurs naturally. And so 9 out of 10 Americans, typically they get too much sodium. The average is about 3,400 milligrams per day, but that's on the very minimal end. If you're eating if you're going out to eat fast food, if you're eating a lot of convenience and prepared foods, it's probably higher than that. I've heard an average of 4,300 before. So the American Heart Association recommends 1,500 milligrams a day. Also, the dietary guidelines, they mention 2,300 milligrams per day is the recommendation for people 14 and older. I think the 1,500 is very, what I've seen if you have heart disease, high blood pressure, that type of thing. But it is an ideal number for heart health. So that's what I would encourage you to talk to your doctor about, what specifically they want you to follow. So to put this in context, I'm a very visual person, so I like to see it. A teaspoon of salt is roughly 2,300 milligrams of sodium a day. So if you're following, the dietary guidelines, 1 teaspoon a day is all you can have in sodium. And you're getting a lot of that by the foods you're eating if you're not eating, many fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, that type of thing. So that, in my mind, that's a really great visual to encourage you to take the salt off your table, put it in the cabinet, out of sight, out of mind. If you add salt in cooking, work on how to decrease the amount. Our salt has an acquired taste. So once you start backing down on that, you will notice the next time you eat something that's really salty. But also using herbs and spices to season and flavor our foods. And K-State has a really good publication. I think it's actually called Seasoning with Herbs and Spices, and we will provide that later on, will be on the website. But it has a lot of good recommendations on, if I'm eating this type of food, what herb or what spice would enhance my food to make it taste the best. So I would encourage you to check that out. It also tells you, how do I store fresh and dried herbs, and how do I substitute or switch them out in recipes. So it's a really great resource. Another thing I want you to be more cognizant on, if you're not already, is the marketing. As we know, manufacturers are looking to sell a product. However, the FDA ensures that if a product is going to say, this is reduced sodium, because in your mind, you're looking at that thinking, oh, well, that's going to be healthier for me. So the FDA requires that it has to be at least 25% less sodium than a regular product. However, you can't just look at that and think, oh, that's reduced sodium, that's good for me, because it still could be really high in sodium. So I think, learning more about that marketing piece and understanding what that means, when we're looking at canned vegetables, if it says no salt added, or unsalted nuts, that's going to tell us there is no salt added during that processing. But you really want to read that food label just to be sure. Which brings me to a food label. Unfortunately, we don't have time today to go into that. However, I did want to draw your attention to percent daily value. If this is something you're not, if you currently don't know much about or don't necessarily pay attention to this when you're looking at food labels, I would encourage you to. So the percent daily value, it tells you the percentage of each nutrient in a single serving of an item. So, if we want to consume less of something, say sodium, saturated fat, trans fats, we want to choose an item that has 20% less. Or I'm sorry, I messed up. 5% or less of an item. So let's look at this nutrition label, and we see sodium for one serving is 160 milligrams. We look to the right, it says 7%. So we're wanting to consume less sodium. It says so 5% or less. But let's say we're comparing this. Let's say this is, I don't know, a soup or something. So we compare that to a different brand, a different type of soup. And let's say that our sodium percent daily value is 20%. Well, we're obviously going to choose the 7%. So we also know, or you may be aware that manufacturers, when they decrease the sodium amount, sometimes they add in more fat or more carbohydrate to make it more palatable. And so, it's going to be a balancing act, but I always would just kind of look at those and really use that percent daily value to determine what might be the better option for me. And it goes both ways. So if you want to consume more of a nutrient, you would look for something that has 20% or more. And so, things like vitamin C, calcium, iron, potassium. And obviously you want to, we want to limit the amount of packaged items and things that we're eating, but, that's reality. And so it's good to kind of have that tool. Also keep in mind, percent daily value is for a 2,000 calorie eating plan. And so it's going to be a little subjective for everybody, but again, it's a good guide to follow. So I could harp on the nutrition area all day long, but I will go forward because I know there's obviously other things. The second point is consistent physical activity. So I talked about setting those small goals for yourself. Let's say you think, okay, well, I'm doing really pretty well in getting more of those nutrient dense foods. But if you hear physical activity and immediately you think, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't have time. I don't have any desire. I want to talk about, some smaller things that we can do, but also the benefits. Of course, for our blood lipid levels, so for our cholesterol, our triglycerides, this physical activity can really help decrease our risk of heart disease and stroke, help with a little bit of weight loss, maintenance, improve our blood pressure, our mood, our confidence, can help reduce our depression, our stress, improve our energy level, and improve our sleep, which is very important. So the recommendations from the dietary guidelines is 150 minutes per week. This is for, to kind of build up that endurance, that cardiovascular health. This doesn't have to be all at one time. To get the benefit, you want to try to do it in 10-minute intervals, but let's say you're not there yet. Well, let's start at 5. So, maybe you like to walk with your neighbor. Maybe you like to walk your dog. Pick things that you enjoy, because as we know, if we don't enjoy something, oftentimes we won't stick with it. If you're having trouble thinking, where do I even start? I like to tell people, get out your calendar. We always put in our appointments, and, oh, I've got to go to the doctor's office. I've got to come to this webinar today. I want to come. Pencil time in for yourself. So maybe if you can only do 5 minutes right now, you say, okay, Tuesdays and Thursdays, I could do 5 minutes. I'm going to go walk my dog from 4 to 4:05. And then, you slowly build that time up. This is focusing on those habits, making this a habit, making it a lifestyle change. That's what's going to help you be successful long term. And then, also the recommendation is to do some type of strength training to build those muscles and maintain those muscles. If you like to lift weights, lifting weights, but even things like carrying groceries, if you watch an hour of TV a day, I always tell people at every commercial, which I guess things don't have commercials a lot anymore, but every ad that you're streaming, get up and walk in place. So, that may be 2 minutes, but at the end of that hour, you may have 15 minutes of walking in place. But you could also do, get some green beans out of your cabinet cans and, do some overhead arm curls, even read a book and do some wall push-ups or squats, that type of thing. Get a resistance band, be creative. Or take a Stay Strong, Stay Healthy class. Another thing is managing your stress. So chronic stress can affect your physical and mental health long-term. It can, affect our digestive system. Obviously, anxiety and depression, headaches, concentration issues, weight gain, obviously high blood pressure, heart disease, and stroke. So I know saying manage your stress is easier said than done, but there are some things that you can start working on today. So not self-isolating. Sometimes people, when they are going through different things, even our everyday stresses, tend to keep that bottled up inside. So finding somebody that you can confide in, moving our bodies more, like we just talked about, focusing on our sleep hygiene. So, what does that mean? Cutting down our caffeine earlier in the day, building some type of routine at night, whether that's 30 minutes to an hour before, turning our lights down on low, not scrolling on our phones or watching TV a half an hour to an hour before bed, maybe drinking some type of warm beverage, that type of thing. Even meditation. There is in our upcoming self-monitoring blood pressure program, we have started using what's called Calm Pack. And it gives you a variety of different stress management techniques and meditations to do. And they're anywhere from like 1 to 12 minutes. But, finding something that works for you that you can incorporate in the day. But also, consider talking to somebody, making an appointment to see a counselor, a therapist. That is a great way to manage stress as well. And so the last point is monitoring your blood pressure at home. So, if you've been diagnosed with hypertension, talk to your doctor about what would that look like if I monitored my blood pressure at home. How would that benefit me? And, kind of get all the specifics. But the reason this might be of benefit is because if you learn the proper techniques, you're going to be getting probably more accurate readings than if you were to walk in a physician's office and get a blood pressure check once in, 6 months or a year. And so this will kind of give you more of an idea of what's really going on with your blood pressure. So, no exercise, caffeine, smoking, or alcohol 30 minutes before. You need to make sure you empty your bladder, wear, thin clothing that you can put that cuff on, finding a place that's quiet to sit and relax 5 minutes before. We all know that we typically don't do that before we go into our doctor. And we need to make sure we keep our feet flat on the floor, our backs are straight against a chair. And we really want to use the same arm every time, and making sure that our arm is resting on a flat surface and it's at heart level. We want to turn the monitor away from us so that we're not looking at it when we're taking our reading. And then start logging your numbers so that you can share that with your provider when you go in. So if you're having some consistent high readings, that might be a sign to you and to your provider that some management needs to happen. But also, monitors are more easy to come by than they ever were, but just make sure that you're choosing a validated tool, and we have a link for that. And so, we can provide that on the website as well to make sure that, you're getting a monitor that is deemed accurate. So I have talked a lot, and I think I want to be able to make sure we have plenty of time. And so we will put this, this is a really great video from the American Heart Association. It's about 2 minutes long, but she goes through the motions of taking your blood pressure accurately at home. So we'll put that on the website as well, so that you could watch that if that's something that you're interested in. And so that concludes our presentation today. This is Stephanie and I's contact information if you'd like to reach out for questions at a later date. But I know that's a lot of information all at once, but again, think about what's something that really resonated with you today that you might be able to go home and start working on right away. So are there any questions or comments or concerns? We'd be happy to address those.
If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box, or you can just unmute yourself and ask them that way as well.
I'm going to also suggest if there's something that you learned from the presentation today that you want to work on or to implement right away, if you put that in the chat box as well, that would be helpful, just to see what it is that you personally think you can start implementing today, or just as soon as you can. Like we have a few things coming in, healthier eating and healthier snack options. Do a better job at looking at the nutrition information. That's great. Focus on eating more nutrient dense foods. Wonderful. Yeah, just keep putting those in the chat. And if you have questions too, please reach out.
And Sherilyn, I have, when Sarah was speaking about the Calm Pack, I've used that a little bit myself to prepare for meetings like these. You know, your heart rate gets going a little bit. So actually right before we did this presentation, I practiced my box breathing. So that's something we can actually all practice right now. Box breathing is great. So when you start feeling stressed, your body will send out signals that say I'm stressed. Heart rate will go up. You start feeling maybe like tightness, muscle clenching, things like that. So internally, our body's giving us signals. But with breathing, we can then give our bodies signals to say, hey, relax. And that's where box breathing comes in. So with box breathing, you'll inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds. And it really transforms you in that moment. You can feel that anxiety building, but after you do the box breathing, it's like everything kind of resets. So if you guys want to try it with me right now, it might be kind of fun. I'll kind of lead it. So go ahead and inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you would just repeat that as many times as you need to kind of feel your stress go down. But that's a technique I've found really helpful.
Okay, that holding was hard, which I guess that's the point. So good job.
Yeah, it does feel kind of counterintuitive to hold it, but once you get the rhythm, it really does help. So
If one of you would put any information or just the name of the Calm Pack or how to access that, if you would put that in the chat to give people more information about that, I've found it to be really helpful too.
And Stephanie can speak more on this, but Stephanie, can you tell them about, I think it's Dr. Melissa Wood and how we met her?
yes. So her name is Dr. Melissa Root, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. And so in February of 2021, K-State Research and Extension became self-monitoring blood pressure partners with the Office on Women's Health and the Department of Health and Human Services. And so we've had the privilege of having partner meetings. It's every quarter we have a partner meeting, and we get to collaborate with people across the nation who are doing work to address high blood pressure and to promote self-monitoring of blood pressure. And so Dr. Root, she founded and developed the Calm Pack, and it's all evidence-based strategies to reduce stress, and it's through meditation and breathing and sound. There's some tracks on her product that has like violin music and things, all things proven to help reduce stress in the moment.
Great, thank you. We'll just get ready to close here the webinar today. And we want to thank Stephanie and Sarah again for sharing this presentation. I'm sure that many of us learned something new to take home and practice. So if you would use the QR code link to respond to a short survey, just a short evaluation survey, that would be really helpful to us. And the link to the recording and the resource information will also be available on our Living Well Wednesday website. And we welcome your comments and suggestions. We hope that you can join us for the next program in our series. It's Declutter Your Mind, Tools to Tame Your Anxiety and Overthinking. And this will be on Wednesday, February 22 at 12:15 p.m. And lastly, if you would like more information or additional resources, please reach out to your local extension agent. If you're not sure where your local office is, you can find it by going to ksre.kstate.edu. You'll be able to hover over your county or where you live and find the location of your local office. Again, thank you and have a good rest of the afternoon.